Roll the intro.
Roll it. Welcome back to Calamity Janes. I'm Madison.
And I'm Bailey. And we are two anything but plain Janes. Me, I'm doing it.
Sorry, go ahead. Do it.
We're two anything but plain Janes who talk about disaster, mayhem, calamity, if we're just being upfront about it.
Absolutely. And
I'm still Bailey.
And you're still Bailey, and I am still Madison. We're sorry for not posting an episode last week. I had a sick toddler, and it was just impossible to do any research and writing. So I'm sorry about that, guys.
We are sorry, best friends, but we knew you'd understand because you, like us, have lives outside of your passions. And as passionate as we are about this podcast, life happens.
Exactly. I think in the future we could meme, mostly I would be happy to undertake this, probably post a 20-second clip being like, hi, sorry, sickness has struck the Wendt household. And I am
the disaster this week is that disaster has struck the household.
Yes.
Vomiting everywhere.
I could potentially do something like that in the future because I do feel bad when I am unable to do an episode because of something like that. But that's what happened. Very sorry for the absence. But that it was not fun. But we're back.
We are back. We are back. I could also make that episode and be like, so sorry we're not here. Madison is going through it. Through it right now.
Yes. Bonnie's first fever was not enjoyable for anyone.
That was her first fever?
It was her very first fever. We made it to almost a year and a half.
Wow. Because she's been sick, but she's never had a fever.
Never had a fever. Huh. Yeah. And it was not fun, my friends. It was not enjoyable.
Can't imagine. Luckily, Finley will never have a fever. Ever. I don't have to worry about that. She's just never going to have one.
Never going to have a fever.
Never.
Yeah, so that is, so apologies, but we're back with another episode, and, best friends, this episode I started several weeks ago, and for some reason has just been so challenging to write, so I have brought it here for you, and we are in the trenches together.
We will help you write it together with our collective disaster brain.
Perfect. All right, here we go. Are you ready?
I'm so ready.
Our story
ASMR disaster. So did you want to talk right now? Sorry. Go ahead. Okay. You can go now.
Our story begins in 1985 in Goiania, Brazil, when a private radiotherapy institute moved to a new building. The institute, designed to treat cancer patients with radiotherapy, left behind a lot of equipment. Notably, they left behind a cesium-137 teletherapy unit that was nearly 10 years old.
Now, is it called a cesium because it has cesium in it?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Indeed it does.
I just would assume, I guess, I don't know how radiology works, to be quite honest. So when you're talking to me about
and you still
these
won't
elements
by the time we finish this episode.
Okay, great. We're not here to learn, people.
No. We're here to listen to horrible things.
Okay. Oh, okay.
So, what did you think a radiation disaster was going to be fun?
I don't know. I just thought you really gutted us the last episode, so I thought surely she'll come up with an I survived situation. Well, spoiler alert, apparently. Okay.
Cesium-137 is highly radioactive. The teletherapy unit, which looked like a dentist chair with a large telescope attached to it, used a small capsule with about 93 grams, or 3.3 ounces, of cesium chloride in a canister made of lead and steel.
Sounds like it's safe and secure in there, if you ask me.
Relatively.
Okay.
The container was sort of a wheel type of structure. When the wheel turned inside the casing, the source would move between the storage and irradiation position. The container was only 2 inches in diameter and 1.8 inches long, so pretty small and unassuming.
Okay.
The Institute moved locations in 1985 and left behind a lot of valuable equipment, including a teletherapy unit that still contained us. I told you this was really hard for me to write. I think I started
Deja vu.
several weeks
Deja vu all over again.
Oh, guys, it's been a rough couple of weeks, but we're coming out on top. Just
We
not
are.
not in this particular sentence.
And as a distraction, I have since Googled what this machine looks like, and we'll put it right here. It's kind of wild. I was not aware of what radiation therapy entailed or how. I guess I knew that in modern day radiation, like they take multiple beams and they like triangulate a spot within your body, managing to like miss every vital organ, and it's only at the convergence of the beams that presumably cancer, right? Is that or whatever you're treating gets targeted.
Mm-hmm. Spoken
This
like
looks-
a true radiologist.
This looks like one big beam,
Yeah,
though.
it would appear so.
Okay.
Okay, I think we should be out of the repetitive clear after that. Sorry. guys.
Vamping.
Okay. In May of 1987, one of the owners of the institute was met with police force when he tried to return to the abandoned site to remove the radioactive material. He warned that someone would have to take responsibility for what would happen with the cesium bomb.
Who is this person?
He was an owner of the institute.
Okay.
Yeah. So this is like a building that is very quickly like in shambles after they move. It's completely abandoned with lots of equipment, lots of dangerous equipment.
And why was it abandoned, or is that covered?
They're just moving to a different facility, and for some reason no one wanted to move into this building apparently.
Well, if they're moving to a different facility, why didn't they want their equipment?
That's a wonderful question. I don't know. It was already 10 years old at the time that this happened, so they might just be going for new equipment, but it was still someone's responsibility to make sure that nothing dangerous was left behind, which is what he was trying to do. So he was trying to get in, and he was like, there is extremely dangerous material there. I would like to collect it to prevent it from hurting anyone. And they were like, no, not going to happen. So after that, a guard was posted at the site to prevent anyone from accessing or stealing the dangerous materials. The owners of the institute wrote to the National Nuclear Energy Commission, warning them of the dangers of keeping the equipment at the abandoned site, and explained that because the city had issued a court order that prevented the owners from entering the property, it would be up to a higher authority to remove the equipment.
Who is paying for this guard? The city?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know that you're going to have the answers to this, but
That's okay.
like they decide to leave the building
Is abandoned.
and
it's
that
like-
and so that's why it's now the city's responsibility, because an individual, I guess if this person's acting as in an individual capacity and not on behalf of like the company to come take it. I'm just thinking, like, what business does the city have? Why would the city care that
These are great questions. I was left confused as well, and I'll get to it barely at the end, but essentially from what
you are setting me up for disappointment?
You should be disappointed. This entire story is disappointing.
Oh, okay. But I'm intrigued because I have a radioactive bomb. He's telling me I have a radioactive bomb, and you're not letting me basically defuse it. So
Exactly.
go on.
Okay, so guess what didn't happen? No one came to collect it.
Well, except for the guy tried. The guy tried to, and they were like, no, eschew.
Exactly. So that equipment sat there for 4 months until the figurative cesium bomb exploded.
Okay, so it really was a bomb.
No, I said figurative.
Well, really was a figurative cesium bomb.
It was a figure. It was. Okay, maybe the next couple of sentences will help you.
Yeah.
You know what? I'm not even going to get mad at you for this because the writing on this is like some of the worst I've done. We're just doing the best we can. Okay. On September 13th of 1987, the guard posted to the site did not show up for work, leaving the site completely open to Roberto dos Santos Alves and Wagner Mota Pereira.
Okay.
Roberto and Wagner partially disassembled the teletherapy unit and took the cesium source with them, thinking it had some scrap value. They had no idea what it was.
So these were not radiology professionals.
No.
Okay.
No. As soon as they got home, they did what everyone does when they find something new and shiny, and they dismantled it.
They smash it against their fireplace mantle.
I think they were a little more careful than that, but that's good to know that that's your preferred method of whatever.
Go on.
That evening, Roberto and Wagner started a chain of events that would rock their community to its core.
Oh, I am intrigued.
Roberto and Wagner both began vomiting, but continued in the disassembly process.
That escalated quickly.
The following day, Wagner experienced diarrhea and dizziness, and his left hand began to swell. A burn soon appeared on the swollen hand in the shape of the capsule.
Yeah. Checks out. It checks out with some like radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
Yeah.
On the 15th, so about 2 days after this started, Wagner went to a local hospital for his symptoms, but was told he must have eaten something that didn't agree with him and was sent home.
So sorry, your body's disintegrating. You must have eaten some bad sushi.
Yes. Meanwhile, Roberto kept on poking the bear and disassembled the source. The next day, he punctured the capsule's aperture window with a screwdriver and discovered a small, mystifying blue light coming from the tiny opening.
It's emitting light?
It sure is.
Okay.
Blue, shiny, sparkly, beautiful light.
And he's, like, not doing hot.
No, I don't think anyone is feeling good at this point. And so then he scoops some out of it's like a glowing salt-like substance. So he scoops some out and basically begins to play with it. And for the life of me, I can't figure out why he did this next part, but he thought it was gunpowder, so he tried to light it on fire.
Oh, I mean, I guess I don't know what would happen. I first thought you said he was going to eat it because when you think about, like, you know, the Radium Girls era and how it was like, oh, this glowing potion's gonna solve all of your, you know, ailments. I kind of expected him to eat it, like radium.
But that's not what happened to the Radium Girls, right?
Not the Radium Girls in that era, though.
Oh, sure.
The reason they were using radium is because it was a panacea. It was, right. The next big thing, including people who were like, oh, you put it in your eyes to make them brighter, ingest it to blah, 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 blah. Anywho, I thought he was going to be like, this was probably good to ingest.
No, thankfully he didn't. Well, apparently nothing happened to it when he tried to ignite it, which was a good thing. So then on the 18th, he sold the items to a scrapyard and tried to move on with his life. That evening, Dever Alves Ferreira, owner of the scrapyard, noticed the mystifying blue light and brought the capsule into his house. Over the next 3 days, he invited friends and family over to see it.
No.
On September 21st, one of his friends managed to release a few rice-sized grains of the cesium from the capsule with a screwdriver and shared it with friends and family.
Oh, no. Okay.
Later that day, his wife fell ill. 4 days later, on the 25th, he sold the scrap metal to another scrapyard. But just before that, his brother scraped a few more grains out of the capsule and took it back to his house, where he spread it on the concrete floor.
Why?
Yeah, I know. It's because I'm definitely not trying to do any sort of victim blaming here at all, but clearly no one here knows about the dangers of radiation. And so it's people who don't know any better messing with a really dangerous substance. And they don't think it's all that serious.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. I guess if I were to see something glowing,
I would run. Yeah.
See, you say that, but you also have a house full of children's toys. And you'd probably be like, oh, that must be meant to glow in the dark. You know, I'm like putting myself in their shoes. Like, okay, you don't know where this is coming from. And like, you trust the people who are giving it to you, whatever you think it's cool. I could totally see how you're like, look at this really wild thing.
Yeah. I think if I were the initial group of people who took it from a radiotherapy institute.
Oh, bad news bears. Absolute bad news bears. But
if
the
it's people who have never, who don't know where it came from, who have never been taught that things that glow a lot of the time are radioactive.
Unless they're fireflies.
They're fireflies. So it's a bunch of people who think they've stumbled upon something magical and mystical, and they're excited by it. And of course they want to share it with people.
Yeah.
So it makes sense. Okay, so he spreads it out on his concrete floor, and everyone is totally enamored with this beautiful blue powder, kind of like greeny substance. His 6-year-old daughter later ate food while she was sitting on that floor. And fascinated by the substance's blue, beautiful glow, she rubbed it on her skin and showed it off to her family. One of the Ferreira women began to notice how many people around her began to fall ill. She was the first person to raise the alarm about this. Good on her.
Good.
On September 28th, she retrieved the materials from the other scrapyard and marched down to the hospital. Because she had placed the materials in a plastic bag, there was very little contamination at the hospital, which was a really amazing thing to do.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think that a plastic bag would be that
effective.
Yeah, exactly.
Wait, there wasn't a lot of contamination to the people at the hospital. I'm thinking you're saying like the people at the hospital haven't contaminated these granules, and I'm like it's a crime scene, but I'm like, what do you...
No, she put it in there and brought it to the hospital, and thankfully no one at the hospital received like a fatal... Yeah. So the next morning, a visiting medical physicist, which sounds like a really cool, interesting job.
Also, the next... I guess it's not like he visited that day. I don't know. The way you're telling the story, it's like, and it just so happened the next day, a man walked in the door, a visiting physicist.
Yeah, you're exactly right. So he confirmed the remains to be highly radioactive and urged authorities to take action. And by the end of the day, every level of government was aware of what had happened.
That, again, escalated quickly.
Once news of the incident spread, 130,000 people went to local hospitals fearing they had been exposed.
Oh.
Yeah. Of those, 250 were found to be contaminated.
So it's like, wow, that got out fast.
Of those, only 20 people showed signs of radiation sickness and required treatment.
So they could tell that some people were exposed, but not to the point of, wasn't severe.
Yeah, apparently you can receive a very low dose of radiation without... I mean, obviously we get x-rays. I think this was probably a step above x-rays or something, but... You can receive a dose of radiation without getting sick from it.
Makes sense. Still very scary.
Yes. Unfortunately, for those who were involved with the capsule from the beginning, the outcomes were very poor. A scrapyard employee of De Vera Ferreira developed lung damage, internal bleeding, and heart damage and passed away on October 28th of that year.
Wow.
Yeah. The little girl who painted herself with the glowing blue powder was initially confined to an isolated hospital room because the staff were too afraid to treat her.
Oh, no.
I know. This is definitely the worst part. She experienced swelling, hair loss, kidney and lung damage, and internal bleeding, and she died on October 23rd.
I totally forgot that, or it didn't dawn on me that because when you've had these exposures, you yourself become radioactive. Yeah. I forgot about that. I think was I watching maybe it was the Chernobyl mini series on HBO. Something about Chernobyl and
brilliant series.
Right. And when all those people went to the hospital, you're like, everyone who's treating them is getting secondary exposure because their bodies are radioactive. And the people who were at the plant had to be buried, around that area because their bodies were so radioactive.
Yeah, exactly. So she died of septicemia and generalized infection and was buried in a special fiberglass and lead-lined casket. Despite those measures, more than 2,000 people protested her burial by rioting and placing stones and bricks in the roadway.
Really?
Yeah. Thankfully, they were unsuccessful, and 6-year-old Leda Das Neves Ferreira was laid to rest.
So they're saying she shouldn't have been...
They were worried about exposure with her being buried in the...
I see. Okay. Yeah. Gotcha. I thought they were she shouldn't have been buried in that way.
No, I think I think the people in charge knew that she was going to be safe. Everyone would be safe with her in that special kind of casket, but everyone else was still afraid that she would contaminate the area.
Got it.
The cemetery and areas around there. De Vera Ferreira's wife, Maria, passed on October 23rd after suffering from hair loss, internal bleeding, mental confusion, diarrhea, and acute renal insufficiency. Lastly, another employee of De Vera Ferreira developed respiratory and lymphatic complications and died on October 27th. I found it really interesting that all of them were exposed, like they all died within like 4 days of each other.
Right.
It was really crazy.
Well, and all within what length of time from exposure? When did this happen?
They were all exposed, I think, beginning like the 18th through the 28th-ish. And so it was about just over a month for just about everyone.
Wow. Wow.
So despite De Vera Ferreira receiving a substantial dose of radiation, he did not die until 1994 when he succumbed to cirrhosis brought on by depression and binge drinking because everyone around him died from radiation poisoning.
Interesting. I can't believe that. That's really hard to believe that he lived that long.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. The 3 physicians who owned the institute were charged with criminal negligence, but due to somewhat complicated legal circumstances involving the promulgation of Brazil's federal constitution, which did not happen until after this, they could not be found liable. One of the owners was ordered to pay $100,000 for the poor condition of the building.
Okay, so I go back to the beginning. This guy who did take the time to come back and say, listen, y'all, not good situation happening here. We need to fix this. Was he not one of the former owners? He was a scientist. He was not an owner. He was just like...
It said he was an owner, so I believe that he was also, held responsible.
Okay, so then it's bizarre.
I agree. I completely agree. And I tried to... The Wikipedia page that gave me 99% of this information brought up the point about Brazil's constitution, and I clicked on the page and quickly realized that it was not going to give me an opportunity to perform any sort of legal analysis that would make me understand this. So I have the same questions that you do.
Fascinating. Not satisfactory. Is there any sort of... What happened to keep somebody else from doing this?
Okay. Topsoil from several homes that came in contact with the cesium, the topsoil was removed and several homes were demolished. Everything inside the houses was removed and examined for exposure. Contaminated painted surfaces were scraped and floors were treated with acid and Prussian blue mixtures. Another, the last real bummer thing that happened was that they, in hindsight, were like, we should have not thrown away so much of people's personal stuff that we took from their houses. We probably could have salvaged a lot more and we just threw it away. Mm-hmm. It was like, you just really kick them while they're down. But in February of 1988, the following year, the state government of Goiás established basically a foundation in the name of the 6-year-old girl that passed to study the extent of the population's contamination from the disaster and to render aid to those affected.
Good.
Yes. So there was an effort made afterwards to help those who were affected, even though it should have never happened in the first place and innocent people suffered because higher ups refused to do anything about it until people were already hurt. But thankfully there was some assistance given.
Especially because this all happened because literally one day the guard who was standing there wasn't there.
Yeah.
Bananas.
Exactly. So that is the Goiania incident.
I guess it never would have occurred to me when you think of nuclear disasters, everything that comes to mind is power plants, right? Because it's a larger amount of fuel, total disaster when they melt down. We have seen this before. Never would have thought an abandoned radiology lab. Oh, yeah. Wait.
Okay, guys. Well, Bailey had to step away to help a crying, sweet little baby boy. So thanks for listening with us this week. We had a lot of fun. We're excited to come back next week, and we hope you guys have a great Tuesday. Thanks so much for listening. Goodbye. Is he okay?
He might be teething.
Hi, sweet boy.
Say hi to everyone. Oh, look at that tear. Look at that tear.
I did a super brief sign off in case you need to go, so.
I figure we're just gonna start anew.
That's okay.
Yeah, got out. We're gonna start fresh.
Sweet boy.
This is Mommy's booth. Yeah.
Bye, little man.
Goodbye, bye, best friends.
Goodbye, best friends. We'll talk to you next week.